the doctor's talking. It was like Charlie Brown. All you heard was wah, wah, wah. Yeah. My wife is writing everything down. And so when I left, it was like a fog. But she guided me and gave me that strength, and God bless her, because I don't think the outcome would have been the same if I was by myself.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to have a conversation, and this conversation is going to be about an issue that's really affecting Black men today. It hits us more often, and it hits us harder in our community. According to the American Cancer Society, Black men are 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. And the reason why we're here together is to really talk about what we can potentially do in terms of having this discussion about prostate cancer to affect the positive lives of the Black men in our community. We call this the unspoken truth. So I'm going to start this conversation, guys, if you're okay, with just talking about your experience with prostate cancer. And I can start off on myself. I'm just recently diagnosed. Actually was diagnosed in November, had surgery in January, and thus far, I'm doing really well. And you know, when I got that diagnosis, I mean, I don't know about you and Allan and Tony, but you know, I didn't know. I didn't know what that meant. I was nervous. I was thinking of my family as well. You know, I have 3 beautiful girls, wife, been married 23 years. And it was a struggle for me to understand why I had to have prostate cancer. Mm-hmm. When I found out, when I did my own research, 1 in 7 Black men have prostate cancer. You know, it still hits me a little bit, but you know, I'm glad that at least I know I had it, and I'm glad I got it early enough. Mm-hmm. That, you know, the surgery was done.
June 28th of 2023 was the day of my surgery. 13 years before that, my father, who just turns 80 this October, was diagnosed and had the surgery done. And robotic was fairly new and felt kind of risky at the time. But the one thing I've always appreciated about my father, as we know, a lot of Black men, as we go down in generations, the pride says, I'm okay, you know, I don't need to go get looked at, right? Which is kind of seemingly a very strong theme among Black men, especially as it relates to prostate cancer. But I'm so blessed that he was always thinking about long-term. He's always wanted to go get checked out. I think because of his athletic background, you realize if I just get healthy, I can prolong things. And so when it came to me, I had been red flagged, you know, up when I was in my late 30s and early 40s, started to pay more attention to my numbers. Right. And I just, you know, started, to be honest, feeling like, you know, my urination was a lot different. So I started getting it checked out, and every few months, you know, just let's check it out. Well, this particular time, the number had gone up. Mm-hmm. And that they said, and their whole thing, the doctors were very reassuring, very comforting. They're like, look, you know, I don't see any issues with this, but there was a point where I had to make a decision and say, like, whatever measures we need to take, let's do it. Mm-hmm. So we took the extra measure to get the biopsy, the extra measure, you know, to do all and I think that's really, for me, I needed a peace of mind. I needed that. And I kept thinking, like, my father did it for us. Not that I wouldn't have done the same, but what that planted in me was I owe it to the rest of my family to turn over every rock.
That's a good point. Tony, what do you think?
Wow, very similar to you, Allan. Well, first off, the first part of my life, I'm invincible. I never thought about health. And I introduced myself as an accidental founder and now CEO of this organization. But this organization was founded by a lot of well-doing people in the nonprofit space. I came in to, quote unquote, save people and teach people. And it turned out they taught me. So when I walked into that school, I was 52 pounds heavier than I am right now. And at 40, I was on 4 medications already. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetic, and at risk of heart disease. And now I'm telling these children about their diet because they live in this food desert, right? And then as I've started learning, I started paying attention to what I was saying. And I watched my own diet. So I went to a plant-based diet 10 years ago, and I lost 52 pounds, and now I just take a multivitamin. But I've also been very aware of my health. So I go for an annual every year. And I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm just looking at the numbers. And I was watching the PSA creeping up 3 years in a row. And I asked my doctor, what's going on with that? And she says, at your age, it fluctuates. And I said, well, doesn't fluctuate mean up and down? It's only going up. So I demanded to see a specialist. So I went out of network, and they sent me to the doctor, and I got the MRI, and then they did the physical, biopsy, bingo, I had it. And my life changed immediately. Just thank God I had my wife with me, because when you hear that diagnosis, first off, the denial right away, impossible. I'm healthy. And the doctor's talking, it was like Charlie Brown. All you heard was wah, wah, wah. Yeah. My wife is writing everything down. And so when I left, it was like a fog. But she guided me and gave me that strength, and God bless her, because I don't think the outcome would have been the same if I was by myself.
And that piece that you said is a very important point. You took active participation in your health. I mean, I was in a similar situation. I was, 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And my doctor said, look, you have 3 beautiful girls. I'm assuming you want to walk them down the aisle. Well, if you keep in this pathway, that's not going to happen. And so I decided to your point, go ahead and begin to start, looking at my diet and start working out. And it was really just coming back from my next annual when they took the PSA, and it was so high. It was like 6 point something. And so, I think that's a major factor that, Black men in general don't really look out for their own health. You know what I mean? Like, they don't go, I'm gonna be honest with you, when I was in my 30s, I didn't go see my PCP. And I had him, I knew him for 25 years. I'd just go every so often when I had a sore throat and I needed that antibiotic, right? That was the major reason. But when I got to, 45, 46, 47, and I decided, okay, you know what, maybe I need to start doing something, because I noticed it was harder to walk down the street. I was breathing heavy, just walking down the street, walking the dog. But we don't do it in general, especially around, that age of 35 to 45. We just don't do it.
Nope.
I have not had a personal experience with prostate cancer, but I am a Black male, and I live in a community of Black males, and I have experiences inside of the church with Black males, in my fraternity, in my Masonic lodge, out on the corner of Lenox Avenue at 137th Street. I'm always in the company of Black males. And I have done a sociological study, an independent one over the years, that takes a look at why Black men don't go to the doctor as often or as regularly as we should. And in many cases, it's because many of those brothers in that age demographic of which I'm in currently, many of those brothers don't feel and don't believe as if they can sacrifice a day off the job to take care of their own health.
The whole issue about not wanting to take time off from work and having a lot of other things on your mind when you need to be taking care of yourself. Just yesterday, I had a patient who I made a recommendation for treatment, not prostate cancer, but he had two options. One was temporary. The other one was a more permanent solution and was a fairly straightforward treatment. His main concern was whether his insurance would cover it, whether it would put him in debt. And so he had to get back to me because he was worried that, this would maybe financially put him over the edge. And he had insurance, but he still didn't trust that it might leave him with financial burdens. So it's a real concern. And hopefully today I'll go back and see him and we'll get it taken care of. But that is a barrier for sure.
My name is Emmett Walker. I am a trustee at Northwell Health System, as well as sitting on the board of South Shore University Hospital. So we were probably in our early teens, which means about the late 60s, when I believe he was diagnosed with the prostate cancer. I remember he went through 3 major surgeries with it. At that time, income, you didn't have it when he wasn't working. So it made a big difference in the family dynamics on how things got done, how my mother paid bills and things like that. But my role became I worked, helped whoever I could, went to school. Probably affected me so I went into the service to help pay bills. So it had those kinds of effects on the family.
Why is it that Black men tend to not really accept that initial discussion with their primary care? Like it's like they're not hearing it. What is it that you think, from a physician perspective, that you could have in terms of that conversation? Not necessarily from the physician to the patient, but like from me to another friend. Like if Allan and I were hanging out, is there some things that I could probably tell Allan that can at least get him to think about maybe going to see a doctor? Because like I try and they look at me like I have 2 heads, and they're like, no, I'm not. I'm good, Mitch. Don't worry about it.
Well, I think people have to go when they're ready and when they're comfortable. What you can say to another person, I don't know that there's any one magic line that you can give them. I think what I found in general with my patients is that speaking to someone who's been through the process has a lot more power than me telling them or somebody else telling them that hasn't been through it.
My name is Errol D. Toulon Jr., and I am the Sheriff of Suffolk County. I speak to many different forms regarding my battles with cancer. I think it's 1, to try and give individuals some sort of hope. 2, to let them know that someone else has gone through this, and maybe draw on some of my experiences to try and help them get through theirs. When someone has not had cancer and someone is talking to them about what radiation is like or what chemotherapy is like, they're not going to understand. But when you have someone that has gone through it and felt the ills of not only the treatment, because the treatment sometimes is just as tough on someone as the actual cure, that they can resonate with me when I'm speaking about it.
I think that the burden and the weight of the diagnosis is significant, and I think that being able to use that knowledge in a way to help alleviate fears, help create a roadmap, a plan, and hope is something that is really powerful. Hope is one of the most powerful things that we can give somebody, and so I hope that through my experience I'm able to provide some of that for my patients. My name is Dr. Tavia Benjamin. I am a urologist. I'm Chief of Urology at Glen Cove Hospital. In undergrad, I considered doing chemistry and going into industry, and I really thought that I would miss the interaction with people. I love working with people, understanding their stories, and helping them through them. And so that really was what prompted me to pursue medicine. And while I was in undergrad, my grandfather got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And at the time he was diagnosed, it was metastatic. And so that played a large role in my thought process in terms of surgical subspecialties. And, I helped him throughout the end of his life and, seeing some of the things that he went through and what our family was dealing with really made an impact on me. And I wanted to be able to understand the disease process a little bit more, but also be able to stand in the gap and help other families who are going through it and hopefully prevent them from going through similar situations.
I know when I walk into a room and I've got a Black patient, they're not necessarily, from my name, they don't know what nationality, what ethnicity I am. And I walk in and you can see a comfort level in their faces, almost a surprise. And then, and so that comfort, that trust, plays a big role in people feeling that they can open up and talk about what's really ailing them. And it doesn't come right away. You need to really talk and establish a rapport, but people then begin to remember other things and they feel comfortable. And they may even bring up things that they didn't think were that important. And then you can see where it may tie into a problem. So trust is, I think, one of the main things.
I don't think it's always because we are fearful. And Black people, it could be the African in us. We are innately spiritual, even if we're not overly religious. We walk, that's not just swagger. We are walking to the beat of a spiritual drum.
Right.
It's innately within us. So when you see that smooth brother walking down Lenox Avenue, that spirit walking and accompanying that brother as he walks. And so when we encounter issues of health, for those who are deeply connected, or let's say connected to a religious community as a church or a mosque or some spiritual place of centering, I have to say to you, I've had plenty of experiences over the years when brothers will speak to me confidentially. Hey, Rev, I'm going up to see my doctors. I'm feeling a little funny. Don't tell my wife about it. There is this idea that I'm going to go, but I don't want to be vulnerable in that close family space. But I need to talk to you about it because, you work for the big man upstairs.
So in case something goes wrong.
And they say something goes wrong.
I need some help.
Right. And in my line of work, I've known cases in 18 years of pastoring when brothers got it right. And I don't want this conversation to always appear as if we have it wrong and we'll always go too late. There are some brothers that go early right. detection and things of that nature.
Right.
But I've also buried and have accompanied families to cemeteries to bury fathers and sons and brothers who still should be here because they waited too late. Yeah. So rather than me speaking positive words at their 50th or 60th birthday party, I'm in Cypress Hill Cemetery in Brooklyn saying ashes to ashes,
right,
and dust to dust.
Good point.
And, it's a complicated topic because, in medical school, we're taught that eventually all men will die of prostate cancer. If you do autopsy series, you'll see that most men have prostate. They died with it, not of it. And so the attitude many times is that, well, we'll watch and see.
All right.
But, Black men are a high-risk group. And the PSA, which is very important, I think, to get measured, there's no set point at which, it hits this number and you better get checked out. It's more the trend and the changes, but you won't know that unless you check it out. And so, it is a very individualized disease. If you have a family history, you're going to, I think, be a lot more aggressive. Maybe that number is going to be lower, but a sudden change might push you more to get that biopsy than somebody else who maybe doesn't have a family history. So there are a lot of components to the management of prostate cancer, which is, again, why it's so important to get hooked up with a physician that you trust and that knows a little bit about the disease.
Yeah, I mean, that really resonated with me, Doc, because I'm convinced after thinking about it that I'm not sure I would have been as aggressive had it not been for my father having it. And then, so the numbers were going up. And like you said, the doctor, they told me the same thing. Like, you know, I think they try to be, they don't want to be too, put you on the edge. But like Tony said, you demanded kind of that extra level. And I think that's what we have to do, right? We have to be very assertive and aggressive with our care and preventative measures, because most of the doctors are going to take that information. I heard the same things. Hey, you know, most people actually die with it. That doesn't mean you're going to have it. And even before I got the biopsy, it was like, well, I think you're safe, you should be good, but you can take this measure if you want for your peace of mind. Now, had I not done that, right? So it wasn't like they were saying, hey, you need to get this biopsy. It was, like you said, it's delicate. It's the range and the rate, not just the number all the time, right? So that's one of the things I really encourage. Just recently, I had a mentee of mine, and he called me and said his dad got diagnosed, went back with a checkup, and the good news was that it has not spread, right? So I'm saying, well, look, there's only one thing to do now, right? And there's still some apprehension, right? Which we can understand, but you know, like I just think that aggression for ourselves, to advocate for ourselves and our health is what's important.
The most important words you don't want to hear come from you, the doctors. Had we only caught it sooner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's,
yeah.
I mean, come on. I've lost a really good friend of mine who passed away of colon cancer at 50. Watching that in slow motion, right? It makes you aware of your mortality and your health, right? And then simply, when I was going through my crises, because it was a crisis, it was like a tornado, and I'm in the middle of this tornado with all this information going. I didn't know how to process it, but I did catch it sooner, right? I did have the robotic surgery, and I'm fine now. But had I not, what's the alternative, right? My beautiful wife and my lovely children, my grandchildren, would be without me, you know?
And
that's the fact.
Yeah, and that's a major factor, right?
That's the fact.
Black men tend to be diagnosed late. And that becomes the major issue, right? Because really, okay, I have it, but now I have very few options. I can't do the surgery, you know? And once those options come in, then it's even like it's compounded, right? Lord, I gotta ask you from a scientist perspective, like, talk about like what's been going on with prostate cancer. Like, why does Black men tend to be the ones that have it the most often? Like, is there something within our genes? Is there something that Black men have that makes it worse for us than anyone else?
Yeah, going right to the core of the question, that was very prominent as scientists started to look at the genes, the gene mutations that cause prostate cancer. As we developed more and more understanding, really solid understanding of those genes, there was the obvious question, is there a fundamental difference between different communities, different ethnicities? And I would say there were always reports that tried to go down that route, and I was very skeptical of them because the differences were never as stark as the actual outcomes that you just mentioned, twice as likely and so on. So more recently, there has been a lot of attention in trying to actually look at what are differences in outcomes of people that are diagnosed with prostate cancer in Black communities versus non-Black, given a level playing field of the care. And two studies that have looked at that have looked at the Veterans Health Association because it's standardized for everybody. And there were very surprising results. In fact, they didn't see that Black men were doing worse given the same starting point and the same care. What they actually saw that they did slightly better. So, but that's a very, very minor there were actually significantly fewer deaths following several thousands of men in the black community than the non-blacks, which starts to suggest that the healthcare system and the access to healthcare are a major driving factor between these differences. And so that turns the attention to the things that we just talked about. When do black men actually see a doctor? If it is too late, then everything, or if it is on the late side, then everything gets harder. Everything would require an extra effort to get back to where it was, let's say, 5-10 years earlier. So these are the things that also in our research we're trying to take into account now. And that goes in direction of lifestyles leading up to that age of 50s and 60s where the incidence of prostate cancer is becoming higher. And trying to understand these differences more closely and how changes, as we just heard, changes in your personal health actually comprehensively could reduce that mortality of prostate cancer to a large extent.
So a healthier environment creates a healthier opportunity for the disease.
I would say so. I think that's a major component. There is, we just heard from Allan about the heritability aspect. And that is one thing that did come out of the genomics efforts and genome studies, that there is a heritability component, which is, however, it doesn't isn't particularly higher as far as I would know in the black community. But having parents or grandparents that have died of the disease actually increases your risk. And we kind of know that this has to do with mutations in genes that take care of your DNA. And there are some therapies that are being directed at that. So that's one
when you say,
aspect.
because I noticed that there are a lot more therapeutics that are out there for treatments. Like you see it on TV and everything like that. Can you talk about that? I think initially there's always been it's either surgery, whether it be robotic or radical, or it's radiology. Whether it be cyberknife or one of these. Can you talk about some of these new therapeutics as it relates to prostate cancer, and when would, how do you know which one works for which grouping? How does that?
Yeah, I think that's so there are these options. There's the surgery, there's the radiation therapy. I think that's really, since there are so many men having to make these decisions, the statistics on who is best suited or best served with which therapeutic opportunity, I think are quite good. So with a good healthcare provider, it should be quite obvious, which path you should follow or should be most likely for success. Absolutely.
So back again to what you're talking about, trust, right?
Absolutely, that trust.
Having that conversation with your physician, who you trust, to help you come with a sort of agreed upon plan of action.
One thing I've always said, and this comes up very often in pastoral care and counseling, Rev, I've gotten this diagnosis, why me? And my response always is, cancer can care less where you graduated from school, or what you drive, whether you live in the Upper East Side or in a tenement building in Harlem. Cancer can care less about any of your affiliations. There's no respect of person. And I always say that the thing that's most important at this stage now is if you connect to the you that perhaps you didn't even know that was there. We are body, but we are also spirit. And the strongest you will ever see your spirit is in moments that your degree can't help you, or your car can't drive you, or your connections can't hook you up and open up a door to get you into a place that otherwise.
Right.
It's moments when everything we've done and achieved ends. That's when our faith is engaged. And it is our faith that takes us over that hurdle, beyond our understanding, beyond that why me question, to get us to a place that will settle us long enough to say, you know what? There's only one thing I've got to do. I got to get this cancer out of me. I've got to go the next step. I have to do this for me and for my family and for my community. We want to see Black men. We want to see Black men healthy and thriving and doing well and happy. We want to see some brothers smiling walking down 7th Avenue in Harlem.
Right.
And the way to do that is to zero in, center in on that greater you, that spiritual you. We're not denying the body, but there's more to us. There's more to our creation than just our body. So if spirit and body get together, you can get through anything that you might be having a challenge with inside of your body, but they've got to connect.